Well, Stratford just came out with their second quarter forecast, and truthfully speaking, they're almost always right regarding what they believe the world is what's going to happen in the world. But something first, the reporting says that Israel government denounces Russia's missile sales to Iran. So the Israeli Minister of Strategic Affairs, Yuval Steinitz, sharply criticized Russia's decision to sell an unspecified number of S-300 air defense missile systems to Iran. APF reported on April 13th. Israel's objection came after Russian President Vladimir Putin signed a decree authorizing the sale. Russia is eager to keep U.S. attention focused on Iran, distracting attention from Russia's affairs in the former Soviet sphere. If you didn't know, the United States is trying to influence as much as they can the European nations and also the Baltic nations in their area away from Russia as much as they can. So you might say that the United States is meddling in Russia's affairs, and they simply are. And we might touch on that in the report in just a second. And something that you should know and not take lightly is that the United States is now, in fact, this is what the analysis says a U.S. balance of power strategy will be on full display in the Middle East. The United States is still playing a critical role in multiple conflicts across the region, but it is no longer placing itself at the center of those conflicts or picking sides. As a result, the Sunni powers in the region will shoulder a heavier burden to keep their Persian Shiite rival in check. Saudi Arabia may be in the spotlight for now, but watch for Turkey to start playing a more aggressive role in the region in pushing against its old geopolitical rivals, Russia and Iran. Russia will watch nervously as the United States continues building an arc of allies along the European borderland with Russia. Even as Russia is pushing into a tighter corner, we do not expect Moscow to take the risk of making a major military push into Ukraine this quarter. So for those who are thinking that Russia may be trying to take over Ukraine altogether, it doesn't look like that's going to happen. Intensifying economic stress will widen fissures within the Kremlin, while Russian President Vladimir Putin's ability to manage this power struggle will visibly erode. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking in Europe as Greece and its creditors go through another 3 months of agonizing debt negotiations. We do not expect Greece to default on its debt this quarter, but Athens is facing a pivotal point in June when a post-bailout agreement will have to be negotiated. And this is probably going to be something that's going to be felt. And one of the reasons why I believe the Antichrist will come out of the European Union is because something's got to change. The European Union is continuing to stay in a stagnation economically, and they know that they need to become a uniform nation that will rely upon one person to be their leader. Right now, that's just not the case. When one nation stands in the way of reforms that they need to be passed, that puts a blockade on all of the European Union altogether. Speaking of economic trouble, it says China's economic problems will become much more visible this quarter as defaults in industries related to the housing sector slow down, become more frequent, especially in northern China. Even as China's economic troubles cause more alarm overall, we do not think Beijing will reverse course this quarter and engage in large-scale economic stimulus. Instead, Beijing will rely on targeted fiscal and financial measures to selectively boost certain regions and industries, while the anti-corruption probe adds another layer of pressure on resource and construction-related industries. Another country to be watching, they're saying, is Venezuela, because with low oil prices, their country and their government is basically falling apart. They will have to rely on Chinese economic aid in order just to survive. Now moving on to the Middle East, and as far as Stratford's long-standing forecast that the Iranian nuclear controversy would culminate in a political rapprochement between the United States and Iran is on course, with the signing of a framework nuclear deal April 2nd paving the way for a final comprehensive agreement later this year. As we articulated, this is talking about Stratford, in previous forecasts, we do not believe the dissenters, including members of the U.S. Congress, Israel, and the hardliners in Iran, will be able to derail this negotiation. So they feel come June 30th, or in that area, and it may go a little longer, that there will be some type of negotiated agreement between the P5, basically the United States, and Iran. Now, of course, Iran is saying that they want to have, when the agreement is signed, they want to have all the sanctions to be wiped out and to be started with of a clean slate. But the bottom line is it'll be sequenced, and there'll be a phasing of sanctions relief for Iran. And it says, in the end, a final deal will emerge involving a UN Security Council resolution providing the political foundation for sanctions relief, with a heavy emphasis on Europe erasing sanctions in the early stage of the deal, while the United States relies on executive waiver authority, not Congress, to suspend sanctions in phases. So the United States is not even going to be really a part of the sanctions lifting at the beginning, because it's going to be more or less the first phase of sanctions lifting will be through the European Union, and the United States will come in later on. And going on, it says the Saudis have come to terms with the fact that their main patron, the United States, will have a relationship with their greatest adversary, which is Iran. Stratford forecasts that the U.S.-Iran negotiations, along with Turkey's internal distractions, would drive Saudi Arabia into a leadership role for the Sunni Arab world. This outcome came in full view in the first quarter with Saudi Arabia's intervention in Yemen, its crippled southern neighbor. And Stratford's also saying that the United States will avoid a direct combat role in the Yemen conflict, though it will be ready and willing to expand logistical and intelligence assistance to the Saudi-led coalition. So the United States at this time, and that's probably the way it's going to be, United States, I think it's going to pave the way for the United States to take a back seat in all Middle East type situations. Yes, they will be in the background keeping things under control, but the lead will be played by somebody else, and I think that's the way it's going to be when the final peace accord with Israel, the Antichrist, and many comes about. I think that the European Union will take the lead in this situation so that they can free it up, because really the United States really wants to be in the South Pacific with China. They've been wanting to get over in that area and concentrate on that area for many, many years. So I think that will lead to one of the reasons why that they're going to allow the Middle East to be spearheaded by somebody else. But here's something I think is really interesting. Though Saudi Arabia is presently in the spotlight, Turkey will also vie for leadership in the Sunni world and will, with time, pick up more of the burden of handling the region's affairs. Turkey will expand its influence on the Syrian battlefield through its support of Islamist rebels, and gradually increase its logistical support through the anti-Islamic State military campaign in Iraq. As the United States proceeds apace with building up an alliance along the eastern European rim with Russia, Turkey will also take incremental steps to increase its engagement with countries on the front line with Russia. Now, they're predicting that Turkey is not yet ready to assume a confrontational position toward Russia and will be exceedingly cautious in any moves it makes in the former Soviet periphery for now. Now, the Bible says that at some point in time that Turkey and Russia will become partners, and that they, along with Iran, will come down upon Israel, and that's when the Battle of Gog and Magog, which is found in Ezekiel 38 and 39, will commence. You know, as I've said many times, at some point in time, this world is going to go from natural to supernatural. And right now, it is a natural world. These military analysts are pretty much on key. They understand the natural realm, and they can pretty well forecast what's going to happen and get it right most of the time. But when the supernatural comes in, when the rapture of the church takes place, that's going to go from natural to supernatural. And that's when these forecasts, such by Stratford and others, will be of no consequence at that point in time, because things simply won't be able to be predictable at all. Now, here's something for you people or those who are following the Islamic State. Though several groups have taken up the Islamic State banner and name, Stratford maintains that the core strength of the group will remain concentrated in the Iraq-Syria theater. They simply don't expect the Islamic State to make any major gains or any growth. And inevitably, they are headed for some heavy losses and some defeats. But we're just talking about the next next quarter, really. So they just don't feel that that's going to be something that the Islamic State's going to make any huge gains. Now, some things that Israel is going to have to adjust to. It says Israeli opposition to the Iran nuclear agreement will not prevent a deal from coming to fruition. As Israel contends with this new reality, it will assume a more proactive military posture in its immediate neighborhood, keeping an especially close watch on Hezbollah's buildup in the Golan Heights. At the same time, the threat to Israel emanating from the Palestinian territories will become more manageable. Saudi Arabia has given Sudan sufficient incentive to distance itself from Tehran. Thus, vital supply lines running from the Red Sea through Sudan and the Sinai to Gaza will be constricted. Now, for you that don't know it, Iran was using a roundabout way through Sudan to get supplies and weapons to Hamas. And now that Sudan has joined the Saudi Arabia alliance to fight against Yemen, that supply line has been constricted. As Hamas becomes more constrained, the group will try to reach out primarily to Turkey and Qatar for support. But for the next 3 months, that's going to be something that's going to be a real problem for them. Now, Stratford even says something about the 10-day disappearance of Vladimir Putin. It says, mystery still surrounds Russian President Vladimir Putin's 10-day disappearance from the public eye in March. However, it has become more apparent that a power struggle is taking place among the Kremlin elite that could undermine his ability to rule effectively. One of the emerging power struggles is between the Federal Security Service and a series of non- or anti-FSB elites such as Chechen President Ramzan Kadyrov, I guess how you pronounce it, and Deputy Chief of Staff Vladislav Surkov. Putin will continue to balance the struggle during the second quarter through his ability to contain such disputes is eroding. And of course, we know that another struggle for Russia is its economic and financial crisis. Even if the situation in Ukraine were calm enough to end financial sanctions on Russia as early as this quarter, low oil prices would still be the factor dragging Russia's economy down the most. Russia's government relies greatly on energy revenues to meet its financial commitments. With the oil prices not expected to recover this quarter, Russia will face significant financial constraints. Low oil prices will also be the main factor keeping the Russian currency weak and relatively volatile. The primary concerns for the second quarter are the large amount of foreign debt due by Russian banks, some $40 billion, and the start of a $45 billion annual budget shortfall for the government. In addition, numerous Russian firms, including the banks, but also large firms such as their big oil industries, have asked for financial assistance from the Kremlin, and they simply don't have the money. Well, at least they don't have it to just throw it away. The government will continue its anti-crisis program, which can provide ailing firms and banks $23 billion in financial assistance from the National Wealth Fund and $16 billion in loans through the central bank, and shift $44 billion to the government budget from the National Wealth Fund. This will plug the holes for the second quarter, but the Kremlin will start reassessing how it will continue such spending programs for the second half of the year. I simply can't see how this can continue if, in fact, the West continues the sanctions, the European Union continues the sanctions, and oil prices remain low. Russia is in a world of trouble, and I have to believe that war is probably going to be the only thing that's going to, especially in the Middle East, will be the only thing that's going to get them oil prices to go up. Here's something else about Mr. Putin. It says dissatisfaction among the Russian public, including protests, will rise this quarter because of the country's economic and financial decline. The Kremlin will be able to manage the unrest this quarter, but with rising inflation, unemployment, and interest rates on mortgages, coupled with slashes in social benefits such as health care and education across the country, Putin's contract with the Russian people, which has kept him in power for 15 years, is fading. This will also put pressure on many of Russia's regional governments. Though the Kremlin will try to enact a series of stimulus measures to appease the population, anti-government sentiment over the economy will grow. And on top of that, Russia is losing the battle with its neighbors as well. And with the shortfall of their government finances, they really can't wage any type of war either in Ukraine or in any of the Baltic nations because they simply don't have the money. Here's something also that's hurting the Baltic countries. It says Russia's ruble crisis, fueled by low oil prices and Western sanctions, has now spread to the entire former Soviet region. That's just one more reason why when Russia comes down upon Israel, the Baltic nations, some of the Baltic nations may come with him. With the filtering in of financial crisis going on in the Baltic nations, they need this thing to stop as well. They need higher oil prices. Now on to the European Union and its importance. As the United States strengthens its presence in the region and Russia struggles with its constraints and regional challenges, the European Union will continue to be a significant factor in the Kremlin's decision-making. Brussels likely will review its sanctions against Russia this quarter. Moscow will continue wooing some EU members, especially in Central and Southern Europe, to oppose an extension of sanctions. The biggest factor in the Europeans' deliberations on sanctions is Russia's implementation of the Minsk Treaty. Given that several aspects of the agreement, most notably the removal of all foreign military forces from Ukraine, is unlikely to be fulfilled in the second quarter, we do not expect the Europeans to lift the sanctions imposed against Russia last summer. So the sanctions are going to continue, at least from a European standpoint. At a summit on the issue in June, the European Union is likely to extend sanctions to the end of the year or potentially delay a decision on sanctions until the next quarter. And the European Union also is going to try to push their way into some of the former Soviet states and try to influence them as well. And going on with the European Union, says during the second quarter, several factors, including low oil prices, the introduction of quantitative easing, and a relatively weak euro, will make the European crisis seem less urgent than it did in previous quarters. However, this will not alter the fundamentals of the crisis, and its social and political effects will continue. Even though this crisis will continue on, it says they're projecting that no country will leave the European Union or the Eurozone during this quarter. Events in the next 3 months will create problems for the blocs further down the road. Now, as I've said, that the majority of this report concentrates on the known factors and the things that, like I said, we're in the natural realm right now. But once the rapture of the church takes place, things are going to change quite dramatically. Some of these things that seem to be automatic and somewhat foolproof, which it's proven to be over the years, are going to change dramatically, and we're going to see things happen that have never happened before. Like I said, the advent of the Antichrist will come forth, and I believe that he'll change laws and techniques in the European Union that will shock the world. And he will rise up as a great ruler in a very short amount of time. Well, that is Stratford's second quarter 2015 report, and as I always indicate, if you don't know the Lord, today is a day of salvation. Don't put it off. 150,000 people die every single day. The Bible says the vast majority will end up in a burning hell. Don't let that happen to you. And you Christians, you've been witnessing to your friends and loved ones for years, but you've made no headway. I would encourage you to get a copy of my Tribulation Period Survival Guide. There's a free copy and a paid version. I encourage those to get the paperback version because you can hand that to your lost loved one. And it assures you that they at least have this information in their hands. The first thing this book tells you to do is to accept the Lord as Savior. That's the first requirement of the tribulation period. And certainly it also says not to take the mark of the beast, but the bottom line is that you need to be saved. So I'd encourage you to get a copy of this book and pass it on to your lost friends and loved ones. Well, this is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.